In a world where a host can't even operate his own microphone, a suit costs $400, and nobody knows what time it is, despite the clock that's literally built into the show, one man has the courage to stand up and say, it's in time, not on time.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone, to Downtime. My name is 𝗢𝗍𝗲 Soutter, and yes, it's downtime, not in time, but not only that, since we didn't pay $400 for the graphics, they don't always load. Apologies for that. That's one of my favorite intros. I love that intro. It's got me smiling a lot. I like those intros. So, with me today is Commander McMillan. We'll be replacing his Andring with a nice little warm fireplace in a minute. It's not that I think of him as kindling, but you know, I've gotten used to the fireplace. So, between that and the I thank you for the story, by the way, that we were talking about in the green room, and the bag of kittens in the red paint. I'm not sure.
You're a cruel man, Nick.
Yeah, well, what goes around comes around. I probably owe you at least as well. Now the net is probably not in my favor on that, but okay. Oh dear Lord. All right. Well, let me get the fireplace going. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Good. Well, let's see. Oh, you know what? I think I can just, do that. Sounds like you're about to say something.
No, not really.
Well, I really appreciate.
Interesting day.
Yeah, I'm personally trying to sort out a couple of things. Okay. And I'm a big picture guy, so it's like in education, when we try to figure out, I sort of always assumed everybody was a big picture guy and like to work to the details from the big. That's what I like to do. Which is one reason why I like 𝐍𝐢𝐬𝐿 so much, is because that's obviously, he is a very big picture guy. Let's start at the beginning of time. So, that's but. There are plenty of people who like to work from the details up, and I'm not at that. So whenever I'm facing anything, I start with the big picture. And what I'm looking at is, okay, so many people I know are going through so many big things, and part of that may just be I'm getting older, so the people I hang with are on the older side, and they're going to be going through more. I'm also curious to know how much of that is just we're perceiving it more. There's always been problems. There's always been, and you perceive it more as you get older. I'm not sure that's so much the case. I think you get older, and my good friend Christopher 𝗲𝗲, who is also a guest host, pointed out that there is a stage of life you hit where you're that final generation, right? Your parents' generation is gone, and that's all on you. And by that point, the movie stars you used to look up to are all gone. The family members that you grew up with are either your age or all gone. And I don't mean to be depressing about it. I don't know that it has to be depressing, but it's been thinking about that because I've noticed a disproportionate number of people around me that I care about suffering, and I've also noticed you're suffering too. Oh, come on.
I wouldn't quite go so far as to say suffering, but yeah, I get what you're saying. But what's interesting with what you're pointing out, I'm surprised at the number of people in my circle of friends and acquaintances that I've talked to recently who all say kind of the same thing, which is that they feel that, like the universe has changed in life is conspiring against them, because there are all these little things that are happening that are making them miserable all at the same time that just seem to have occurred. Now, as you say, I don't know if that's something that existed before, COVID and the lockdown and everything, or we became more aware of it because of the isolation, or if indeed there is, something in the ether that has changed, and it's just life is getting more complicated, more taxing, more onerous. I can't really tell you, but it certainly seems that way in a lot of situations.
Well, and there's so many possibilities, and like I had said last night, or I think it was the night before, it's more often than not, it's more than one thing. It's a confluence of things. One possibility too is we live in actually the easiest and best time. If you were going to be born at any time in human history, this is the time to be born in for everybody. For everybody. I mean, pick a race, pick a gender, we've got problems. I'm not saying we don't, but pick a. It's better than it's ever been. And but that also means, I think that we nitpick, and we don't dwell on the good things we have. We go after in this time and era, I'm entitled to X, Y, and Z, which 200 years ago nobody would have ever dreamed of asking for.
Well, I'll stand that argument on its head. I will say 200 years ago, the majority of people, ultra wealthy aristocratic philosophers being an exception, most people didn't have the time or wherewithal to stop and think about how miserable they were. They were too busy with the day-to-day task of literally trying to survive the next 24 hours.
Yep.
And as you know, we're safer, we're healthier, we're better fed, et cetera, now. So you do have that time to start thinking philosophical, in quotes, very large definition of philosophical, but you have time to start pondering those philosophical ideas, the imponderables of life. And in many cases, you aren't equipped with the tools, the educational background, to be able to really think through all of that. And so it does seem enormously overpowering at times. And I think that may be part of the contributing factor as to what's going on.
Well, and the goals were so different. There was a Judge Judy once, and I was a huge fan of Judge Judy. People in the legal profession are mixed on Judge Judy. Most lawyers I met really did not like her. And she was a legit judge, and she had earned a lot of respect, and she knew what she was doing. But a lot of lawyers that I knew thought that she was just way too. You didn't have to treat people the way she did. On the flip side, I think that's one of the reasons I liked her, is because, wouldn't you love to be able to? And if me as sort of a amateur in the legal profession, or in the legal in studying law. There was something about it. But I remember one time, two children were suing their parents, and it was funny because you could tell they really didn't want to sue the parents. They were just pissed that the parents hadn't taken them seriously, and they had decided collectively, the two kids, that their parents had a lot of leftover trauma from their childhood that needed to get resolved. So they booked them for this therapy cruise that had a lot of talk therapy, had a lot of music, gongs, the whole 9 yards. And these guys were this is exactly. And they did it for about 3 or 4 hours before they said, "No, we're getting off the boat. This is not no." And they left, and it started this whole family feud about why wouldn't they even bother? The kids just love them so much and want them to get over their trauma. And so Judge Judy said, okay, this is an easy fix. And they were suing for basically the money back for the cruise, which they hadn't wanted to do in the first place. And so Judge Judy just turned to the guy, the father, and said, where'd you guys come from? He said, well, we came from Hungary. So, okay, so you guys came from Hungary, you were immigrants, you came to the U.S. Yeah. What was your biggest concern when you were here? He said, well, one of them was that, would the children have shoes? That was a big deal. But usually it was really just the food, as long as they had food, and we wanted them to get educated, of course. So, we tried to teach them when we could and tried to make sure that they were getting to school. But, she's like, okay, sit. She goes, I don't need you guys for this part of. So she just let the defendant sit down. She goes, you guys don't, you're done. And she just sat there and said, these guys have accomplished more in their life than they ever dreamed they could. You guys are happy, you're healthy, and you're sitting here able to, face a judge and make a cogent argument, despite the fact it's I can't believe you're out here. Like, so you're smart, you're educated, you're happy, you're well fed, you're standing up on your own, you're doing all of these things because of all the sacrifices these two people made. It's like, they don't need therapy. They don't want therapy. It's meaningless. They've accomplished it all. Yeah. It was just,
this gesture, right?
I don't actually. I was just, what? No.
When you're on the flight deck, it's so noisy, you can't really talk to other people. So everything is done with gestures, and there are certain ones that are well established. This one is remove your head from your sphincter.
I thought it was banging head against a rock or something. I knew it was going to be one or two. No, remove your head from, And the kids still really didn't get it, and I think you need to have some life experience and some serious trauma in your life to get it, and these guys were. But finally, she got them to just drop the suit. She's just like, why are you suing them? Like, you're suing them because you're pissed and you think that they're not getting it, and the reality is, of course, they don't get it. They'll never get it. And they worked very hard to put you in a situation where you have the luxury of getting it. I was just like, that was really well done. So I loved that episode because that really so we've got Tony Designs is in the live chat. Oh my God, it's been like a year since I've had to say that. Oh dear Lord. Okay. All right. It's going to turn into a whole new concept.
Sorry.
No worries.
No worries. I had to silence because as you can hear, the chorus has started. One of the dogs outside has seen a deer walking up the driveway, and everybody's going crazy.
Oh God! I can hear. It's that. When the howl turns almost into pleading.
Large dog is coming. The funny smelling large dog is coming.
Oh dear Lord. Yeah, no, we've had a problem with our dog with that. So I think I told you the story. I did not want dogs. I hated dogs. I absolutely hated dogs. Loved cats. Had a cat all my life. Hated dogs. And my wife always wanted a dog. She had a dog growing up. She really wanted a dog. I remember as a kid, my best friend had a dog, and every time you go over to his house, the dog was constantly, I'm gonna mute you in the. I'll get you muted, and as soon as you sit down, I'll unmute you. So the dog was constantly jumping on you and all this, and I was always waiting for him to get the dog off. He's just like, well, just kick the dog in the chest. I was like, I'm not hitting an animal. Could you just pull him off? And I was like, well, and then they tried to pull him off, but he was stronger than they were, and it was this whole. And so wow. So we've had a request in the live chat to see the dogs as well. So, I can hear him.
Big dog.
Oh, there he is. Big brave boy. Oh. Yes. Well, I
with the half head.
That's the plead. That's like, why don't you understand? We're under attack. We're under siege. Don't you get it?
Shush.
Oh, dear Lord.
And then it's complicated by the fact that these two have decided that they are mortal enemies and will destroy each other.
Oh, no. Oh, dear Lord.
They're just so idiotic.
So I
You both get exactly the same number of treats, the same number of cuddles, and everybody's happy. But no, I've got to be the alpha dog. I was here first. He's an intruder. I will stop him.
That is kind of, in my view, a cute thing on dogs. So we ended up. My wife really wanted a dog. I knew I'd be stuck. Okay, I'm gonna mute you again. Ooh. I knew I'd get stuck because I work from home. So I'm just like, I'm gonna get stuck. I can't believe this. So she ended up getting the dog, and I knew she wanted one. So we got the dog. She got a puppy, black lab puppy, and I decided I was going to learn how to train him. I like to learn new things anyway, as you know. I'm just constantly learning. There's nothing I love more than learning. So I said, I'm going to learn how to train a dog. And the more I learned, the more I realized, no, these dogs are actually these really amazing creatures. And the problem more often, let me unmute you here. There we go. The problem more often than not was the damn owners. And that they didn't understand how dogs worked. So I ended up, I got in the best shape of my life, 2 hours a day. I was out hiking with the dog and training. And we got it so that we could let him out in the back. We had the invisible fence. We could let him out in the back. He would, once you let him out, he'd go do his business. He'd hang out there as much as he wants. And then we'd change the handle to a lever handle so he could jump up, boom, hit the handle, let himself back in. And then we would actually close the door behind him so he wouldn't let the cats out. So I got him trained to do all that. And we've done that with done most of that with this dog. We haven't trained him on closing the door because there's a curtain there and he rips it off and yada, yada, yada. At any rate. But they go out back completely on their own, and they can let themselves back in anytime they want. So, they've got that kind of freedom. And, oh, dear Lord, we do get deer back there. And my dog will be out at 2 a.m. in the morning because I'm up at 2 a.m. in the morning, and he knows I'm up. So if I don't let him out, he starts to give me a hard time. I was like, okay, fine, go. So I let him out, and he's out there at 2 a.m. in the morning, and then he's chasing the deer. And he won't break the fence, but he's not interested in coming back right away if I call him. And I don't usually, I have an emergency recall, which is for emergencies. That's not emergencies, but he's going after it. Like, we got neighbors all around here. It's just like, oh, dude, best case scenario, we're going to get complaints and the police are going to show up. Worst case scenario is going to get a poisoned steak, because they don't usually do that here in Massachusetts. But there are places they do it, and there's no place that's above it. Somebody's. Yeah. So, he's been giving, and then we let him back in. He starts yelling from inside the house, and my wife, actually DMs me. My phone goes off. I'm like, she's just like, could you let the dog out? I was like, no. It's like, sorry. So there are moments. Enough exercise. That normally is not an issue. But yeah, I told you the other one. I'm going to. I'll tell it to you again. When I first trained my dog to close the door behind him. And it's not as hard to do as it sounds. You just have to break it down into its individual steps. So what I had him do was actually just close it with his nose. You put the treat right up to the door, and as he's trying to get the treat, he nudges the door. And as soon as he nudges the door completely by accident, you're like, good boy, he gets the treat. You keep doing it until he realizes he's supposed to nudge the door. Then you get it so he's nudging the door all the way closed. And then if the door is all the way open, you can get him to nudge it all the way shut. And then finally just get him to, as it gets to the last point there, he just jumps up on the door, puts his paws on it, boom, door's shut, done. So it takes a while, but especially with labs, they're easily trained with food. They love food, so they're easy to train. But
see, I have the opposite problem.
Okay, yeah, what's your problem?
My dogs have figured out how to open the door.
Now, is it a handle, or is it a knob, or is it?
It's a handle, not a knob. So, and they understand that if I flap my paws at this part of the door, somehow magically it eventually opens. I don't think they consciously understand what's going on, but they know that this action results in this reaction.
Yeah.
And I don't really mind, and this was before we had the third dog, so it didn't matter if they were coming in and out, except that when it was really cold outside, and the dog decides he wants to go outside for some reason and leaves the door wide open so the freezing air comes in, and all the money you just spent on heating the house up is gone. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Puppy.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I give after learning how to train dogs, I give dogs far more credit than I used to. But I used to go to the dog park all the time, and I'd find people there who were like, "Oh yeah, my dog speaks English." Okay, look. On one level, that's a defensible phrase because my dog knows about 50 words, and I knows what the word is, knows exactly what the word is, and knows what it means. So if by that you mean that they can translate the sounds to a concept, which is what knowing a language is, then yeah, they know a little English, and I'd be okay with that. But the ones that would tell me that would be the ones where like the dog would do something bad, nip at somebody else, or jump on somebody, and I'd be like, no, we don't jump on strangers, okay? We don't jump on good people. He's a good person. Don't jump. And I'm just sitting there going like, hey, doggy, you want a new daddy? No, I'll take you right now. Just come with me.
There's
please.
An interesting series of YouTube videos of a woman who's working with, I think it's Stanford, it could be Berkeley, but it's some university developing language skill kind of thing. And it's kind of trying to figure out how much a dog can understand and learn. And rather than trying to speak to the dog and have the dog converse with you, what they did is they put these little buttons down on the floor, and the dog can go over and stamp on the "I want to go outside" button, and he's telling you, "I want to go outside." So you let him out, and he'll ask questions. And over time, they've added these, and I think it's approaching like 90 to 100 different word or phrase buttons. And the dog really is communicating.
Yeah.
It's not understanding English, but it understands certain things, means certain things. But what's really freaky is the dog will start asking what I could only call philosophical questions.
Really?
Like, oh yeah, it's like, okay, I'm a dog. Yes. You're a dog. No, I'm a person. Oh, so I'm a person. No, you're a dog. Why are you a person and I'm a dog?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's like, holy crap.
So I saw one that was the world's smartest dog, and it was someone who was training their dog specifically and the dog had about 200 words, and it included colors, shapes, so you could say, get the red triangle, and you'd have 20, 30 different things there, and the dog could get the right one. And that was something. But one of the things that there's the somebody's going to have to put this in the live chat because I've forgotten. So if somebody could drop this in the live chat, the name of that there's a fundamental question, which is why haven't aliens contacted us? And there's a whole bunch of answers to that. One of them is they're not interested. One of them is there's no really such thing as aliens. Another one is, well, there is, but none of them have been able to move faster than the speed of light, so they're not getting here. One of them is basically every race annihilates itself past a certain point. But the one that I'm most fond of is that, yes, they have, but we're not really capable of understanding that they're talking to us and that they're aliens any more than fish have any idea who or what is feeding them. The difference in intelligence would be so different. So we see them much more as a natural phenomenon.
Understand the words that are coming out of my mouth.
Exactly. I'm like, isn't it possible that aliens have visited us and we are completely clueless? And we don't know how to interact with them in any meaningful way. So we don't, and then, an alien, does something weird they shouldn't do, and a whole bunch of human beings just die of heart attacks. And we're like, oh my God, we've died. No, it's been this complete interaction that nobody knew was going on. It wouldn't shock me. I don't know that that's what's going on. It wouldn't shock me. So that's sort of I think it's entirely possible we're experiencing aliens in some way and just don't have the intellect to comprehend it. Yeah, we see it more as a natural phenomenon than a real thing. Or,
well, a lot of it's perceptual. And we tend to, both as individuals and as a species, I think, apply our own perceptions as to what is going on rather than doing an actual analysis and trying to say, it could be that, or it could be any one of these other 150 things. And we really do kind of force feed things to suit our own understanding and our own perceptions, and to make ourselves feel, I don't know, empowered, smarter, more important, what have you. And I wish I could remember which book it was. There was a book I was reading, and they were trying to kind of explain this concept. And the idea was, it takes intensive training to get out of that mindset. And they were trying to give an example. So the guy who he's talking with says, look up there on that hill. What do you see? I see a white house. He says, okay. Bob, who's been specially trained about this, he says, Bob, what do you see on that house, on that hill? I see a house that's white on this side.
You
see the subtle difference. And that's the point, is that most people make inferences, logical ones in many cases, but they make inferences that aren't really justified. And I think that is likely what we're talking about in this case, is that people, you know, the dog presses the button and says, I want to go outside. Oh, isn't that cute? He's asking to go outside. It may not be that that's what he's thinking. He's thinking that that means, I don't know, pay attention to me. And then I'll wag my tail and stand over by the door and you'll know I want to go outside. But, you know, we don't know. We haven't figured it out, but we're anthropomorphizing for the animal. Yep. We're adopting our own conjectures for whether those aliens are communicating with us or not, et cetera, et cetera.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'm fascinated with biases and the ways that our brain operates. And when I was teaching computer science, I talked a lot about that, because I think that has actually a lot to do with computer science and ultimately the idea of whether or not we're going to get artificial intelligence. My question, and it sounds like it's tongue-in-cheek, and I say it tongue-in-cheek, it's a legit question, which is, okay, if you're going to argue that artificial intelligence is possible, first you're going to have to argue that natural intelligence exists. I mean, prove to me that human beings are intelligent, and then we'll have a conversation about, at least intelligent in the way that people think. And then we'll have a conversation about whether it's possible to create a computer that can do that. We've had on a guest a couple of times who was an expert on fallacies, and he'd said a couple of things that I really liked. The first was that human beings' brains, and this is something psychologists have talked about for a while, aren't geared for accuracy. We think they are, but they're actually geared for efficiency, finding the closest to the right answer in the fastest possible amount of time. And that's what has served us and allowed us to evolve to where we are now, is efficiency, not accuracy. But the other thing is, he spent a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time, because I had the BA in philosophy, so I had an early understanding of what these kinds of problems are. And every time I think I've overcome it and I don't do it anymore, I realize, oh, I still really absolutely do it. And the difference between my understanding of fallacies and the layman's understanding of how communication works, not realizing that fallacies are even a thing, feels like the Grand Canyon, right? And I look at it as the Grand Canyon. It's like, no, it's about a crack in the sidewalk is the difference between me and that layman's understanding. And it's funny because I see other people who are learning these sorts of things and like, oh, I don't do that shit anymore. Yeah, you do. With luck, you can train yourself. You can train with a lot of work. You can train yourself to, and it's almost cognitive behavioral therapy, right? It's almost like you just have to teach yourself, like, you know, bad boy. You don't make these assumptions and zap yourself with a juice of electricity, and then eventually you'll learn. Okay, I'm not going to make these assumptions, but it's not natural for us to think clearly, and it's. The people who've worked at it the hardest that I've seen are just a bit better at it than most. They're not they still, especially when it becomes emotional, because you get so blinded by your own biases sometimes, it gets emotional and you don't. Yeah. So I'm going to put this thing up here, and I was, let me just see here, where did I put it? Why don't I put it up there, and then everyone can get it. Now, I've showed this before once or twice here, and this is a great experiment on confirmation bias, which is basically how your brain really only looks for evidence that confirms theories, not evidence that would disprove a theory. And so you can actually run over very good evidence that could give you really important, valuable information. But if it disproves something that you already believe, you have a tendency to just gloss over it or not put together that you really need to figure it out. So there's this card thing here. So let me see. That is on. All the displays were changed. So we're going to guess which display that's going to end up being, and I guess it ain't that one. Oh dear Lord. So no, that one doesn't want to say hi either. There you go. All right. So let me. I'm going to just frame this up just a touch, and what we're going to do, we just want to make it bigger too. I'm going to make this bigger so everyone can see it easily. Oh. And let's but I love this one. I first saw this in college, and I've seen a couple other examples of it, and some of them are great. This one I just picked. I gotta just like preload. I call on this kind of thing enough. I should just preload one of these and have it like good to go whenever I want to have this discussion, because I just find this kind of stuff absolutely fascinating. I also like the images that you can't see with the human eye. You can't see them properly. It distorts, so it always looks like something's moving. Like you look at a flat picture of something and it's moving, and you're like, why is it moving? It's like, it's not moving here. I can't see it properly. All right, so let's... okay, you'll all forgive me. Instead of putting this in a nice frame, I'm just going to drop this up there, and there you go. So I can also make that just a little bit bigger. So what we got there is 4 cards. And I am going to make a statement, and we're going to want to figure out whether this statement is true or false. It's that simple. I'm going to make a statement. We just want to know, is this statement right or is this statement wrong? And let me move that out of the way, because I don't mind that it's blocking McMillan, but it's blocking me, and I have an ego about these things, so we're going to put that card over here. So here's the statement. Every card that has a number on one side has a letter on the other. Every card that has a number on one side has a letter on the other. That's my statement. We want to know if that statement is true or false. So I want to think about that for a minute. The statement, every card that has a number on one side has a letter on the other. I'll let you think about that. Anyone who wants to immortalize their answers in the live chat and drop that in and see if they've decided which ones you would have to flip. And you want to flip over the minimum number to confirm whether or not that statement is true. Real simple. So, and I'll give you a hint right now, even as you guys are thinking about it. Again, this is on confirmation bias, which is people tend to only try to prove something, not to disprove it. And that's one of the things that this is going to highlight. So let's start with A. Do you think that A is a card that's going to need to be flipped? And let me get so I can see the live chat so that we can see who is making any claims here on this. And people have probably seen this before. This is a reasonably common one. Any thoughts on A? You think we need to flip A over?
You asking me? I couldn't tell you. I mean, if I was relying on my approach for these kind of things, I'd say you cannot be certain until you flipped all 4 of the cards over to see what's on the other side. It's entirely possible that one of them has a smiley face on the other side.
That is true. Okay, so we're going to go over it card by card. So card A, you do need to flip. You need to flip card A. And the reason is because the claim, again, is if there is a number on one side, there's a letter on the other. So, wait, hold on a second. Each card that has a number on one side has a letter on the other. So why, now I've forgotten why A needs to be flipped. Okay. Oh, no, sorry. Found that A and 4 are the two most common responses to this, is that you have to flip A and 4. Now, wait a minute. Now, I think this is because it's normally done with even numbers. I've done this before with, suppose a card has a number on one side and a letter on the other. So you have to be careful of any card that's got a number on one side and wouldn't have a letter. So you actually have to flip the 7. You have to flip the 7 because if there isn't a letter on the other side of that, then you've just disproven that claim. Where there's a letter on one side, where there's a number on one side, there is a letter on the other. People say, well, gee, you got to flip D. D has to be flipped in order to confirm whether or not this is true. You actually don't. And the reason is it doesn't matter what's on the other side of D. D could have a smiley face. But the claim isn't that where there's a letter on one side, there's a number on the other. That's the reversal of the claim. The claim is where there is a number on one side, there's a letter on the other. So if there's a number on the other side of D, then this is true. It's still holding out to be true. But if there's another letter there, it doesn't matter because the claim was where there's a number on one side, letter on the other. So it doesn't matter what's on the other side of D. D's another one that people do like to flip. Because like, well, if there isn't a number there, no, you reversed what you're trying to prove or not prove. So D does not have to be flipped. So let's see. Now, this says 4 is irrelevant because these guards, now you see, that's the thing. Each side that has a letter. This is funny because I'm reading this. This is off of the Social Psychology Network, and they've done this wrong. Okay, yeah, okay, there you go. There's the full claim. My bad. The original claim was up at the top. That's the claim. So if the card has a vowel on one side, then it's an even number.
Even number, okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, there
you go.
Yeah, the odd number and the D aren't important.
Oh, well, the even number and the D aren't important. If the card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on... Let's see. Oh, no. You see, here we go. We can't even... But it helps if you get the thing right, and I read the wrong. So what I was reading was on the top. It says, suppose each card had a number and a letter. So, okay. I read that wrong. So I gotta like memorize and prepare these things instead of just doing it on the fly. That might make it somewhat easier. So if a card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on the other. Okay, that's why you don't need to flip 4. You'd think you'd need to flip 4, but you don't. It says if a card has a vowel on one side, there's an even number on the other. You have to flip A because A is a vowel. So if there is no even number there, then you've just disproven the thing. So you have to flip A. D is irrelevant because it doesn't matter what's on the other side of D.
It's not a vowel.
It's not a vowel. You also don't have to flip 4.
7 is also irrelevant because it's odd.
No, but that's why you have to flip it. Because
why?
Because if there's a vowel on the other side of it, you've just disproven the theory. So it says if the card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on the other. So you have to flip 7 because if it's got a vowel, you've just proven this false. Again, we're trying to figure out whether it's false or true.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
So 7 has to be flipped because it could falsify it. 4, on the other hand, does not need to be flipped because if 4 has a vowel, then it is consistent with the claim because there's a vowel on one side and an even number on the other. However, if it's a consonant, it doesn't matter because the claim it has nothing to do with consonants. The claim is if the card has a vowel on one side, then there's an even number on the other. Doesn't say the reverse. It doesn't matter whether what an even number has on the other side. Even number can have anything on the other side.
So the entire riddle rests on defining terms.
Well, yeah. Well, and you have to you have to define. You have to do something I failed to do here, which is to accurately say
read what the statement is.
Yeah, that would. Gee, wouldn't that be a help? So it's if the card has a vowel on one side, and I'm gonna now have to frame that up again. Yeah, I botched it. Apologies to everybody. And I've done this one so many times, and you'd think I'd just have it like memorized because I'm always calling on it. But
one of my favorites is the one that was done in World War II of the airplane.
Oh, you've told this story. I love this story, and I agree with you. Yes, that is it. That is exactly it. Please tell that story.
It's fairly easy to find it, but it's a silhouette of a twin-engined airplane. And the argument was too many of our aircraft are being shot down when they go out on missions. So we want to analyze and figure out what we can do to increase the return rate. So they went in every aircraft that returned from a mission, they documented on this picture, this silhouette of the airplane, where all the bullet holes were. Again, these are the planes that got back from the mission. These are where they were shot. And they said, okay, obviously, those are the places on the plane that are getting hit the most, and therefore we need to put more protection in them. And somebody who actually understood this problem that you're talking about here said, no, it's the other way around.
Yep.
The aircraft that are being lost are the ones who got hit in the places that don't have any bullet holes in them.
Yep.
Because when they got hit there, they were shot down. So if you protect those areas, which incidentally corresponded to the cockpit, the engine nacelles, and the fuel tanks, if you hit those or armor those up, then the aircraft is much more likely to return safely. And it worked, but they were literally well down the road toward figuring out how to apply armor to all the parts of the airplane that really didn't need armor.
And it's that exact problem. It's also the selection bias because they are all the planes they are selecting from to check are only the ones that returned. And it's like, okay, there's a problem there. Those are the ones that made it. It's also a part of one of my favorites, and I think this one occurs much more often than philosophers or people who talk about these biases give it credit for. Many other biases are actually just a variant of it. Including what's called the fallacy, which I like. The fallacy is just where,
fallacy. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh my God!
Yes, I had to go there.
My wife's going to be there, like, well, hon, how was your thing with Commander McMillan? Well, I'm trying to have an intellectual conversation with the guy, and he's a.
I'm the comedic relief.
well, I was about to say what ahead. It is. I was about to say the innuendo you just made, but I can't admit it because if I admit it, that means I got the joke. And then I get the next line from you, which is, well, gee, Nick, how did you know that? That's what makes you think that that's what I was saying. So I'm moving on.
Wise, very wise.
Fallacy, which is if somebody makes a bad argument, if there's a fallacy in their argument, we assume that their conclusion is false. No, it means they failed to demonstrate their conclusion. It doesn't mean their conclusion is wrong. It just means that argument to demonstrate the conclusion was faulty for some reason. So just because somebody makes a bad argument doesn't mean that the conclusion is false. We naturally assume it means that, but it doesn't. So that's all a part of what's called affirming the consequent, which is to inverse a causal claim or connection that's been made. So the one I like to use is I say, well, if John is hungry, he will eat. And then I say, John is eating. You see John is eating. What does that tell you? It doesn't tell you anything. Most people say, well, it tells you he's hungry. Well, no, I said if he's hungry, he'll eat. But there could be any number of conditions that would cause him to eat. I just gave one. I didn't say it was the only. I didn't say if and only if. So people tend to get confused with that one until I go with a second, which is much more obvious. If my car is out of gas, it won't start. If my car is out of gas, it won't start. My car won't start. What's the conclusion? None. It might be out of gas. I might have the battery may be dead. There's a million possible things. But our brain naturally goes to, oh, well, if the consequent, if the second half is true, it must be the first half that caused it. And that isn't If true.
A, then B, then obviously C. It ain't obvious, nor is it right.
So, and that's so if I'm making an argument to prove something's true, I failed to prove it. Well, that thing must be false. Like, no, you just don't know. Yeah. Anyways, that's it. I'm a nerd, and I get all like hot and bothered talking about these things. And I got my mind in the gutter. Not that, okay, admittedly, not that it's that far a trip, but, you know, oh dear Lord. So I got to tell you, it's not, I mean, these kinds of discussions I have found aren't normally ones I have with military people. What is it about this stuff that fascinates you? Well, no, I just don't apologize. I'm just sitting there going, like, it's amazing that you and I have so many of these sort of philosophical things in common, and I'm curious what has piqued your interest in it. I assume a lot of it's very similar to what piques your interest in history, but I'm just curious what it is that
I think a lot of it's because I like to understand how and why things are what they are. And, you know, that's why I'm fascinated with history, because I like to know, well, why did this thing happen the way it did? Could it have happened some other way? What would have been the things necessary to change the outcome that made it happen that way? That kind of stuff. And I think it extends beyond that to a lot of stuff with life too. You know, why does this happen? Can that be changed? Is it something we want to change, or is the way it is now the best option? That kind of stuff.
I
am nothing but a servant to the dog.
Aren't we? Well, it's worse with cats. What's the expression? You know, I'm gonna mute you there. I'll unmute when you get back. There's that expression. You feed a dog, it thinks you're God. You feed a cat, it thinks it's God.
Yes.
I used to work as an anti-theist, which was, I mean, I did debates. And I really wanted to go down that avenue far more. I was doing that when we started In Time, and then In Time just started sucking up more and more of my time, and I found I enjoyed doing it somewhat more. My wife liked it better because at least I was talking to people. But the two, there was, you know, anytime something that the odds are just like a billion or gazillion against happens, I'm always told, well, there you go, you have a miracle. Oh, look at the guy. Oh, he's a handsome guy. Or she.
Guy.
Right? Is that a she or a he? Which one is that?
This is the big boy.
Oh, hello there. We're going to give him his own window. Yes. He needs a camera. Give him a camera. Give him his own little window. Starsky needs to do that. Starsky should do that for Fucha. Fucha is more popular than... So, you know...
I can definitely see this guy being more popular than me.
Oh, yeah. He's just sitting there. He's just loving it. He's loving
Thanks for burping into the mic. You're a clown.
Oh, dear Lord. So, you know, people will argue any event that is the odds against are so high. They'll say, okay, it's a miracle. No, a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature, usually in your favor. Is how it tends to work out. And we haven't seen one of those since Jesus, you know, raised the dead and walked on water. We've no evidence that we've seen it. So, allegedly. Yes. So, there was I think it was, let's see, it was, I want to say it was 1987. Baby fell out of a 23rd story window in the Bronx. And there was a family moving in that day, and they had taken all their stuff in, and they had just used a pickup truck to shuttle it all in, and they had filled this thing with all the leftovers, which was packing peanuts, foam padding, the whole 9 yards. The baby falls 23 stories and lands right in the thing, perfectly safe. And everyone's like, well, it's a miracle. It's like, okay, fine. But in Albuquerque, New Mexico, some guy, you know, and I think this was in 2003, goes off and just shoots his pistol off into the air randomly. He's drunk. He comes out of a bar. The bullet travels something like 2 miles, which is practically unheard of, but it was a cold day. The air's thin, the temperature's right, the wind's right. And there's a family walking down the Rio Grande, and it hits a 7-year-old girl in the head and kills her. The chances of each of those events are almost identical. But one's a miracle, one's working in mysterious ways, or just a fluke.
It's a tragic accident.
And I'm saying, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
And it's, if you take a jar of pennies, toss them onto the floor, whatever pattern they've landed in, the chances against them landing in that exact pattern is almost incalculable. I mean, if you calculate that exact pattern down to the molecule of where they are on the floor, the chances against that pattern is incalculable. And yet there it is. Statistics is one of those, people need to learn what statistics are and how it works before you start saying, oh, it's a miracle just because of how unlikely it is. Anyways, that's the kind of shit that interests me. So,
absolutely.
So dovetailing the two, I have no doubt you know who Giuseppe Zangaia is, and that deal. So I think we should talk about that. We should talk about. There's at least 2 events in World War II.
I'll let you introduce Mr. Zangaia since I have no clue who he is.
Okay. And then I want you to tell me, so we're going to each come up with ways in which random luck changed the entire course of the world. We would all be speaking German right now if it wasn't for a janitor in a hotel in Chicago. The janitor decided to do his job a little extra well on one day, saved us all from losing to Germany. What he did was there was going to be a big speech that night, and they were setting up chairs for the speech. And one of the chairs that had been set up in the back was wobbly. And it was like, I don't like this chair. It's a little shorter on one end. I'm going to replace it. So he takes that chair, puts it in a corner, and gets another chair and puts it in with a good chair. That night, someone comes in, Giuseppe Zangaia, comes in, grabs the first chair he can find. It's the wobbly chair out of the corner, stands on it, takes out his rifle, aims, fires, and kills the mayor of Chicago. Having said that, the mayor of Chicago was not his goal. It was that wasn't who he was aiming for. He was aiming for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This was an experienced assassin. He could hit anything with a rifle, but his chair was off. So he missed and killed the wrong guy. Now, if he had killed FDR, his vice president would have taken over, and his vice president, among other things, detested the New Deal and was adamantly against it and would have vetoed it, let alone not helped ram it through Congress. If the New Deal hadn't happened, it would have taken us at least 3 to 5 years longer to recover from the Depression. We would not have been able to recover from Pearl Harbor as quickly as we had. We wouldn't have been able to enter World War II when we did, and Germany likely would have won, and or somebody else may well have developed the bomb. I've got another interesting theory on that one, and we would have lost World War II. The reason we didn't lose World War II was because a single janitor said, crap, this chair is no good. I'm going to replace it with a good one.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's just pure happenstance. Fortuitous, and we see that a lot, but...
So now...
I mean, the argument you can make there is less about, it was a miracle or not, than it was, is life predestined or not?
Well, I think...
Was the janitor predestined to realize that the chair was wobbly and change it out? Was the assassin predestined to choose that wobbly chair as opposed to some other chair that could have been at hand? And so on and so on.
The only way to even have that discussion would be to assume that one alternative is better than the other, because if you don't assume that, then the predestined argument isn't. I personally think losing to the Germans would have been absolutely terrible. There are plenty of people who don't think that. And since we didn't go down that avenue, we don't actually know what would have happened. I'm glad we didn't, but that's me.
God, I wish I could find it. There's a great short story where they invent time travel.
Mm-hmm.
And some guy gets hold of it and is, well, I'm going to do what I always thought I would do when I get hold of time travel. I'm going to go back and kill Hitler as a baby. And everything goes to shit. So then it turns out, no, there's a time travel police, and they go back and fix the problem. You can't get Hitler because then these things happen as a result. And this, and you finally realized that everything in history is rotating around this one thing of who's going to go back and kill Hitler. And are they going to, how quick is it going to take before they correct the problem and get history back on track because some jackass hasn't read the contract, and so on and so on.
Well, my thesis is that having studied history, I've reached this conclusion. History is nothing more than a successive series of extraordinarily long shots coming through. That's it. That's yes. It's an excess. That's it. That's all it is. And it kind of has to be made by those long shots because everything else is what was expected anyway. But it's and again, it's the pennies on the floor. You can throw the pennies 1,000 times; they'll never land the same way. And each time, whatever you get, the chances against it were a gazillion to one. But there had to be a combination. So that's Giuseppe Zangai. I know too, if I recall, just staying in World War. Well, no, we can also. So, and this is one I'm thinking you may know better than I. We basically would have lost the Civil War if the winds had changed at just like it was right before, and I think it was because the French were able to interdict the British, and they would have missed them, but the winds changed favorably. They interdicted the British, and we were able to wrap up a battle. But I've forgotten the details. But
you mean the Revolutionary War? You said Civil War.
I did say Civil War, and I did mean Revolutionary War. Thank you. So there's that one, and then there's the idea that Dunkirk may actually have been a miscommunication between who was it, either Goering or somebody, and a platoon, and there was a miscommunication. And if that one miscommunication hadn't happened, would have lost World War II as well.
Sure,
it would have wiped out. So I don't know if you know those, or is there anything like that fascinates you, do you think, or?
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but yeah, every time I'm reading a book about some historical event, you keep running across little things like, well, what if you hadn't had that big storm as the Spanish Armada sails into the English Channel? Would the Spanish have been able to pick up the army from what was then their possession in the Netherlands, transport it across, and overrun England, which basically didn't even have an army? How does that change world history? Would we be speaking English, or would we all be speaking Spanish? Who knows? What if Suleiman the Magnificent decides instead of going to take, Budapest, he's going to go in the other direction and take, Persia or something, or go east instead of west and convert, instead of North Africa, convert everything into India. Yeah, there are all these little. Some guy wakes up in the morning and I'm going to drink this coffee with my left hand as opposed to my right hand. I'm not going to comb my hair until after I eat breakfast. Tiny things, it's the butterfly effect. Tiny things can have an enormous effect that is completely unpredictable.
Oh, that just got me thinking of a terrible joke. I think I may try to tell it anyway. I probably shouldn't. I'll tell that joke in a second. Ooh, I shouldn't. It's a little inappropriate probably. But before I even go there, what if Constantine woke up one day? I mean, what we have right now is Constantine basically woke up one day and said, I think it'll be Christianity. It's just that.
Seriously, that's about what it was.
Imagine if it had landed on anything else. I don't know if this just got me thinking about. It's a Jewish joke. I don't know if I should be telling Jewish jokes. Oh God, but I'll give it a shot. hopefully I'm not going to get in trouble for this one. 2 Jews decide that they're going to end the war. They're going to kill Hitler. So they get up, they get knives, guns, the whole 9 yards, get into an alley, and they know that he comes from the beer hall, noon, every day, comes by, and so they're going to get him. Like, grenades, guns, knives. They are ready, man. They got this. So almost time. Finally, noon comes around. No Hitler. Okay, we'll wait. We're patient. 12:05, no Hitler. 12:10, no Hitler. 12:30, still no Hitler. So finally, one of them turns to the other and goes, "Hey, I hope nothing happened to him."
Well, there's an interesting one that's actually part of Irish history.
Mm-hmm.
During the Irish uprising, where they were working towards independence, and there's an IRA group of guerrillas who were going to assassinate the big landlord for their district. And they know, same kind of thing, they know he comes down this path every night at the same time coming from work, and they're waiting and he doesn't come. It's like, 𝗓𝐴𝐽𝐿, I hope nothing happened to the kind old gentleman. Yeah.
Okay, since we're going off the deep end here on this one, so guy's going through Boston, and he's not paying attention. He's just driving down Route 9, he's not paying attention. All of a sudden he sees there's a car in front of him, but it's too late. He hits the brakes as hard as he can, but bam, hits the lady behind him, and it's like, oh, shit. Or, sorry, hits the lady in front of him. It's like, oh, shit, Okay, so he's hit this lady. Cop pulls over, and cop goes, "Oi, give me your, let me see your license." He goes, "Oh, you're a McConnell. Oh, I'm a McDougal. Where are you from? Are you outside of Dublin? Where's your family?" He says, "Oh, my family's, we're just a little, southeast of Dublin." "Oh, do you know the O'Connors?" "Oh, yeah, I know the O'Connors. I was over there for 3 days ago. Their son just graduated. Oh, yeah, he's a hell of a lad. He's a marvelous boy. Well, let me ask you a question. How fast was that bitch in front of you traveling in reverse when she hit you?"
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that and guy stops at a checkpoint in Ireland. The guy goes up to him and goes, "Oh yeah, listen, I just got to know before we let you through. You Catholic or you Protestant?" He goes, "No, I'm atheist." "Yeah, but are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist?"
Variation on that one.
Yeah.
Guy's walking down the alley in Londonderry, and somebody leaps up behind him and holds a knife through his throat. Says, "Are you Catholic or Protestant?" Thinking fast, the guy goes, "Neither. I'm Jewish." "Allah be praised! I'm the luckiest Arab in all of Ireland."
Oh no! Oh no! Oh, Gerald. Ouch. Oh. Well, so a Titan put in the live chat was saying that there are channels that do alternative history. So one of the books I would like to write, and I've never gotten around to it, but I'm always thinking about it. That's one of those things, right? That's the problem. I'm always thinking about it. Is like just U.S. history in long shots. One of my other favorites is Martin Luther King Jr. Very close to no one ever hearing of him. When he became famous because there was an opening in the Montgomery Improvement Association at just the right time when they were having the bus boycott, and they needed somebody to organize it. That boycott was supposed to happen 6 months prior. It was supposed to happen 6 months prior because a young black lady got onto a bus. She was tired. She'd been working all day. She sat down, and then she was told she had to get up and move and, give up her seat for a white man. And she refused and said she said no. So they arrested her. Now, her name was Claudette Cole. And the NAACP and a whole bunch of other organizations rallied around her. They're like, "This is it. We're going to do this." And it turned out she was 15 years old and pregnant. And they said, whoa, we are not making the poster child of the movement that we're going to try to start here and trying to change things.
A pregnant 15-year-old.
Bingo. So they put the whole thing on hold, waited 6 months until Rosa Parks got on a bus, and the same thing happened. If she hadn't been pregnant...
We all know Rosa's name.
Yeah. And if we had all been pregnant, you wouldn't have known Rosa Parks' name. You wouldn't have known Martin Luther King Jr.'s name. The name you'd have known is Claudette Cole.
Yeah. It's all about perception.
Yep. Oh, well, yeah, that was... Start. Oh, I was thrilled about that. So when I was writing The Water Thief, that was one of the discoveries that for me that was. I mean, there are businesses right now that have perception management. I was like, ooh, I need to work with that. And the idea that it's marketing, but a step further, it's literally how do we gaslight our customers? How do we gaslight everybody? It's what Russia does 24/7. We've had this discussion. It's perception management. It's now they've done it so much. It's like the Russians have an expression. I think I told you this. We pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. They pretend to actually bother doing even the perception management. People pretend to bother, but at this point they're just so used to it. It's like, what do you want me to believe? That? Okay, I believe that. And they don't even bother trying. Everybody knows it's lies all the way down. Both the people doing it, it's another world.
Well, and the flip side of that is when they're actually told the truth, they don't believe that either.
You had told me the story.
It has to be a lie.
I think you did that in college. Was that you in college where you had told a buddy that it was the Illuminati and that there was all this other, and then finally when you tried to tell him the truth, he refused to believe you?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't Illuminati. It had to do with a historical war game we were playing, and somebody decided to tell him that, oh, yeah, the South Africans almost changed sides. They were going to join the Axis because, all the Dutch Boers were far more in line, and they were all racist, and they hated the English, and the Germans were supplying them with, tanks and their carrier submarines underwater, and they were ready to go, but the Zulu stopped. It just made up this ridiculous, not even alternate history, I mean, bizarre pipe dream. And he bought it hook, line, and sinker. And a couple months later, when we were trying to, convince him that, no, that was BS, we made it all up, he got angry, not that we had lied to him, but that we didn't believe that truth, because that was the obvious and only truth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I've seen that more times than that. I think I had already told the story where I tried to convince people I was psychic, and I thought when I was done, I'd be like, you see, it's amazing how the human brain works. No, they were pissed. They were really pissed. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie Tora, Tora, Tora?
I have not. I've had it recommended more than once. I haven't seen it.
It is outstanding. And the thing that to me makes it so compelling is you're sitting there watching it and you're going, okay, how could anybody not understand that means the Japanese are about to attack? Well, they've discounted that. Okay, now I can't miss this. This one is an obvious indication the Japanese are about to attack. No, that didn't happen. And just, it's this cascading series of nobody can believe it's going to happen, so we wish it away until it actually can't be made to go away anymore. The level of ineptitude is mind-boggling. But that's fascinating, and it's great to watch the movie and think about that as happening. But then you think about the question of, okay, what happens if somebody at some point does get the message and does take the appropriate actions to alert the fleet and do everything that's supposed to be done, knowing what's about to happen? How does that change things? And here's what's really bizarre. There is a good chance that had that occurred, the results for the U.S. would have been even worse.
Really?
Yeah. Because if the warning comes in with enough advance notice and the ships get underway from Pearl Harbor and go out to sea to try to intercept the Japanese then locate and attack them at sea. And so instead of 3,000 people being killed in a harbor when a few ships sink, and most of those ships are actually raised and restored to active duty, and most of the people who go into the water are pulled out of the water and saved, all those ships are out on the high seas when they're sunk. And all of those sailors die. So instead of 3,000 people, it's probably closer to 15 to 20,000 people.
Interesting. I've got a question for you, then I want you to tell a story.
Sure.
So this is, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin a fireside storytelling with your storyteller, Commander Lance McMillan, Senior Esquire. So we'll start that in a second. Senior Esquire. We already have the Junior Esquire taken. So, all right. So first thing is question. I've heard a theory that we actually did know that it's been well established, I think, at this point that we knew they were going to hit somewhere. We just didn't know quite where. Pearl Harbor, they were worried about sabotage, so they put all the ships close together. But I've heard another theory that they actually figured out that it was going to be Pearl Harbor and that they figured out in time to move the ships. They decided not to for two reasons. First, because they felt that it would be easiest that if this happened, then that meant that we could actually, get the war underway, yada, yada, yada. And that also the Japanese, there were stereotypes, racial stereotypes, including that, well, because of their eyes, they really can't, they got the slanty eyes, so they can't see bombs well and they can't hit targets well. So there's really a limited amount of damage they can do anyway. So sort of based on those racial stereotypes and the thinking that it was actually a good idea to just fully enter the war, they knew and decided not to warn Pearl Harbor. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, and that's one of the reasons I love the movie, is it actually covers all of the lead-ups to that.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it shows you all of the steps that people made the wrong choices. And if any one of those choices had been the correct choice, things would have been incredibly different. So we had an inkling that things were leading up to war. Everybody knew it. In fact, it was being speculated about in the newspapers at the time. The thing is, nobody knew when that was going to come. More to the point, we were hoping to avoid it, and hence we were still in negotiations with the Japanese. And it was all about getting the Japanese to stop the war with China. They'd been at war with China since, I think, 1932, if I remember correctly. So the pressure keeps building. And at one point, several months before, about a half year, maybe a year before Pearl Harbor actually occurs, Roosevelt, bowing to pressure, says, we're going to put an embargo on the Japanese, and we're not going to sell them scrap metal.
And oil, if I recall.
No.
Oh,
that's
okay.
all that he intended
was
for it to be was scrap metal. Now, one of the bureaucrats in the Department of State who had connections to China, I think his brother was actually a missionary in China, hated the Japanese for what they'd been doing. So he took it upon himself without authorization that when the order went out, it included other things than just scrap metal. It included, very importantly, oil, but a lot of other stuff too. Now, when all this happens, the Japanese look at their current stockpiles and they can calculate fairly easily that their economy is going to come to a screeching halt because they don't have oil, they don't have the scrap metal, they don't have any of the stuff they need to produce the things that they want to produce. Now, admittedly, in their case, most of what they want to produce is military hardware, but that's not the point. The point is they're being told you can't do this, we're going to destroy you as effectively as if we were invading your country by shutting down your economy entirely. So at that point, the decision is made within the Japanese government, okay, we need to make sure the Americans understand that we cannot countenance this decision of theirs. And then a series of steps are taken, which in many cases we're well aware of as these things are going on, that are going to lead to war. Special training, convoys moving troops around, etc., all preparatory. And because we can read the Japanese codes, we know exactly what they're talking about doing. So if you watch the movie and or read detailed books about this, literally 48 hours before Pearl Harbor is hit, I mean, we know almost to the day when the Japanese carrier strike force leaves Japan. We don't necessarily know where it's going. There's speculation it could be Pearl Harbor, but most people think it's actually going to be the Philippines, which was an American possession at the time. So, yeah, I mean, Pearl Harbor's put on alert. But the order that's sent to the commanders in Pearl Harbor, and here's one of the other problems, there is no single commander in charge of what's going on in Pearl Harbor. It's divided between the Navy and the Army. And divided command, as we know, leads to all sorts of problems, viz. The Russians in the current war with Ukraine. They have a divided multiple sets of command, and you can see where that has helped them. Anyway, they tell Pearl Harbor, be aware there is a strong potential that the Japanese will be going to war sometime within the next, I think it's 96 hours, is when they calculate it. But the order is vague enough that it doesn't say, go on full alert. It just says, be aware. And so the commanders look at this. This is two senior, very, very senior military officers, one Navy, one Army. They look at that message and says, well, it doesn't say that we need to be on alert. Therefore, that means that Washington knows the attack is going to fall on the Philippines, not on us. So we don't have to go to extraordinary measures. We're still going to be on, a degree of heightened awareness and such. But that's why you get all the planes being parked together on the runways, because their concern is more that the large Japanese American population on Oahu are going to sabotage the planes, and you don't want them dispersed out in these little revetments where it'll be easy, so you put them all together in the runway so you can watch them real closely. Well, that makes it really easy for the Japanese to drop one or two bombs in the middle of all the planes and everything goes up. You see what I'm getting at. Yeah. So you get that confusion. The next thing you get is on Sunday morning, when the order comes in from the Japanese government to their ambassador saying, we need you to deliver this ultimatum that essentially tells the American government we're going to war in 30 minutes, and you need to deliver it at this specific time. So the guy who's the head of the code breaking section says, damn, everybody needs to see this. But it's Sunday. So he's running all the hell and gone all over D.C. trying to find people to show it to, but it's Sunday. So they're at church, they're off playing golf, he's busy, et cetera, et cetera. And when he gets shown to people, it's like, well, I don't want to be the one who's responsible for putting everybody on high alert and then have this thing not happen.
Yeah.
So I'll defer my decision until Bob looks at it. And Bob looks at it and says, well, I'll defer my decision until George looks at it and you see where we're going on this. You see, there's a pattern developing of it's a peacetime mentality when in fact you are effectively already at war, even though not a single shot has been fired. And then it gets even weirder when you start getting in close proximity to the actual attack. The Japanese are trying to infiltrate miniature submarines into the harbor to torpedo the battleships. One of our patrol destroyers intercepts and sinks one just outside the harbor entrance. The captain calls up and notifies the command section in Pearl Harbor, and their reaction is, yeah, well, you've only been in command for 2 weeks, so, you're probably just overreacting. You don't know what you're doing. We're going to ignore you.
You probably sank a whale.
The brand new radar station that's put up and has been operational for a couple of weeks detects a large number of planes coming at Oahu from the north. And so they say, what are we going to do? Well, let's call the command section and say, hey, we got a bunch of planes coming in. Now understand, they're not even supposed to be operating the radar at this time. They're supposed to turn it off because they're just in a training stage right now, and training time's over. It is Sunday morning, after all. You're supposed to be going to church. But they call the command section and say, hey, we got incoming airplanes. Guess what? Oh, well, they're probably our own aircraft that are flying in from the West Coast, so don't worry about it. And you see what I'm talking about. It spirals out of control with people just saying, don't worry about it. We're at peace. War isn't going to happen. And to some extent, it is because the information that is coming in that we know this is about to happen is so highly classified that barely anybody knows about it. Even weirder, technically, the president doesn't know about it.
Really?
Because FDR had been getting all the intercepts and being, in his morning briefings, they'd give him the documents to read so he could form his own opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And then they found that he was just throwing it into a drawer and forgetting about it. So they said, well, we can't trust the president to handle classified information. And you may see some parallels with that with recent government administrations. Yeah. Anyway, so the military decides on its own, guess what? We're not going to tell the president what the hell's going on because obviously he doesn't think it's important enough to keep it safe. This is what happens when you relax your awareness of the world around you, when you're relying on preconceptions like we were just talking about earlier in the show of I don't want to see what this evidence presents because I've already made my decision and I'm going to make the evidence fit my decision.
Yeah, which also happened in World War I. But rather than expand, this has been a spectacular. I love these kinds of. This is one of the reasons I like. The whole point of and I'm going to shill, and then we're going to do Papa Lance hour. But it's so. For those of you who I think everybody here knows the deal, but this is Overtime. It's one of the In Time channels. If you go to the In Time channel, subscribe, and if you subscribe here, it really helps us out. We're trying to get to 1,000 subs. Makes it easier to monetize. As soon as we're monetized, it takes the chains off, and we can do a lot with this channel that we can right now only do with Overtime. Why are we splitting the channels? I guess I wanted more to do with my life because it's a lot more work, but it's easier for everybody. And there are people who, I would literally get complaints from people who just loved how we deal with the news. And would say, why are you guys talking philosophy and you got a fireplace and you're doing all these things? Just talk news stuff. I don't want to hear about, You know, we had on one of my favorite shows, Dr. Carrier, discussing was Jesus real, and what are the odds that there was actually a real person named Jesus ever in history. So, you know, and so we have those things on one channel, and the people who like those, and there are plenty of those, and they're like, why are you covering the news? I've got CNN, man. I don't need to see. It's like, I really like, you're comparing me to CNN? Really? What'd I do? Like kill your descendants or something, that a blood feud? You're comparing me to CNN? That's almost worse than comparing me to Fox. At least with Fox, I can just laugh my ass off. But at any rate, so if you can, you know, help us out with these channels, and if you like any of this content, if you like what you're hearing, you know, share it. Hopefully on this channel you can clip stuff. YouTube won't let us clip on the other one, but, you know, share the stuff you like with your friends, and it really helps us out. So having said that, we are going to wrap it up, but before we do, so we're gonna have welcome to story time with Papa Lance, and we're gonna ask Papa Lance about a historical situation, and he's gonna tell us a little story. Now, I really hate like patriotism as a concept in most senses. You know, concepts of loyalty, stuff like that. I'm loyal to ideals, not really to you know, my loyalties are based on people who are countries or whatever that I see following certain ideals. And if you stick to those ideals, and they're reasonably French vanilla ideals, they shouldn't be too complicated. But if I see people sticking to those, that's where I tend to go. But there is a story in World War II of an attack that was made just after Pearl Harbor. Now, it turns out, I thought kind of everybody knew about this, but I actually didn't learn it in my history class, or if I did, I slept through the class. Most people that I know haven't heard of this story. It was an attack that was, more than anything, just designed to show the Japanese that we could actually hit them back after Pearl Harbor. It was thought to be impossible to do, and it was called the Doolittle Raid. And it is one of the few ones where I start to feel patriotic, because I'm sitting there going like, that's Americans for you, dude. We're lazy. We elect incompetent, corrupt, and probably, you know, bed-soiling tangerines as president. We do a lot of fucked up shit, but don't piss us off. And this is one of the ones where I can't not help patriotic. I don't know how many of our audience have heard about it, but if you could please tell us, what were the circumstances around the Doolittle Raid? Why did we want to do something like that, and what was it, and what was the effect?
Sure. Before you do that, I want to point out one thing. Patriotism is different from nationalism. Patriotism is having pride in your own country. Nationalism is hating everybody who isn't from your country.
Ooh, I like that one.
So patriotism isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it can very easily morph into nationalism, which is a distinctly bad thing. So, Doolittle Raid. The decision is made that we need to do something to shore up morale in the United States after Pearl Harbor. And it's important to understand that the attack on Pearl Harbor really did basically have a similar effect to a knee to the groin on the United States. Many people were just stunned. How could these filthy little yellow devils, you know, do this to us? You know, then racism was a major part of that viewpoint. So the decision was to try to find some way to strike back and show that we were not helpless, that we were not losing, that we were just getting our feet back under us before we started kicking ass. And the quickest way to do that is to decide that we're going to launch an airstrike, like the Japanese did on us, against Japan. And we'll talk about the effects in Japan in a minute, but the way they do this strike is pretty remarkable. They take an aircraft carrier and they put medium Army bombers on it. Now understand that the aircraft are not designed to operate from an aircraft carrier. They need a much longer airfield. They are much wider. They have no possible way of ever landing on the carrier after they take off. So the goal is put these things on the carrier, slide up through the northern Pacific, and hopefully nobody will see us, get within 300 miles of Japan, because that's the extreme range, and launch these bombers off. They will fly in, bomb Japan, and then continue to fly on to secret air bases in occupied China. Understand, Japan occupies much of China at this time. So in effect, these guys are landing in enemy territory.
Okay, so the planes couldn't even return. Why use these bombers? Why not use something that could just fly off, or just use a regular, a Navy bomber?
Range, because we only had a few carriers, and if Pearl Harbor did anything, it alerted everybody to the fact that the day of the battleship was over and the day of the carrier was here. So we only had 5 carriers available in the Pacific at the time. So nobody wanted to put those at serious risk. And the difference between an Army medium bomber, which could be launched from 300 miles out, and a Navy bomber being launched off that same carrier, which would have had to have been within about 150 miles, give or take. So almost twice the range. If you're launching from 300 miles and you don't have to worry about the planes coming back, you just turn around and you run like hell. And by the time the bombers have dropped their bombs and the Japanese command has figured out what you've done and sent planes out to find you and sent ships out to find you, you're long gone. They won't find you. That makes
sense.
Theory.
Yeah, okay.
Now, to understand, these planes, as I said, are big, they're heavy, they're not designed to operate from carriers. So they actually have to go to the extent of stripping almost everything out of the interior of those bombers except for the bombs. And they add additional fuel tanks in so that they have the gasoline to get as far as they need to go. It's to the extent that the defensive turrets, they take the guns out of those and put broom handles in there to make it look like they're still there.
So they're defensive turrets on these planes that are going to attack Japan. The turrets are
don't exist.
Handles. Well, they exist. They're just made out of wood.
Yeah. You throw the wood at somebody like a spear.
Just if you're lucky. Okay. This sounds like I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. All right. Let's this sounds great. Okay.
So the Hornet, who's carrying the bombers, and the Enterprise, who's escorting her with a standard outfit of Navy aircraft, and they head in, and they're supposed to launch, as I said, from about 300 miles out. Except they run across a Japanese fishing boat at about 400 miles. And so they say, the hell with it. We're not going to turn back without doing this. And Doolittle, to his credit, says, you're right. I realize that most of us are probably not going to survive, but we will at least get there and drop our ordnance. So he takes off from the Hornet, heads inbound. The carriers take off. They sink the little fishing boat. The bombers get to Japan. They drop their bombs, and they continue flying on.
And on Tokyo, right? I mean, this isn't just they're bombing Tokyo.
This is famous. The famous 30 seconds over Tokyo, right? That's what it's called, because they're literally over the target area for about 30 seconds.
Okay.
They really don't do any significant damage. It lands one or two of the bombs land on something semi-important, but nothing critical is destroyed. And as I said, we'll talk about the impact on the Japanese in a second. I want to finish the mission.
Ladies.
So they continue on. Some of them make it to China. Some of them ditch in the sea. I think one of them actually ends up landing in Russia, in Vladivostok, where the crew is then interned because Russia's not at war with Japan. And some of the crews that crash land or land in China, they actually make it home. Doolittle is one of them who does. Others are captured by the Japanese and, horribly tortured and executed. The Japanese decide that the Chinese, who are helping land the aircraft and such, they're going to take reprisals on them, and there several thousand people are murdered in a fit of vengeance. So that's what the raid is, and both carriers managed to get home safely. The effect is not what everybody intended. We thought that the bombs were going to, we'll destroy an important aircraft factory, or we'll destroy a ship that's being built in dry dock. None of that really is what happens. It does two things. Number one, it alerts Japan to the fact that they are vulnerable to having this happen. So they make a plan to expand their defensive perimeter out well past where they had planned on putting it originally. And that's where the whole operation at Midway comes from. That's its genesis. The same thing with the invasion of the Aleutian Islands, American territory, that the Japanese do land troops and occupy for some months. By doing this, the Japanese are kind of scrambling, and the operation plans they come up with for these operations, and especially for the Midway operation, are so rushed and so ill-considered that, again, our communications intercepts, and this time we actually are paying attention to our communication intercepts and code breaking. We say, they're going to attack Midway. Let's ambush them, shall we? And that's what happens. And in a single stroke, two-thirds of the entire Japanese carrier strike force, all their fleet carriers, are sunk at that one battle. And our loss is one carrier. So it's a decisive effect on how the war is progressing. And it comes very early, and that battle at Midway would not have happened absent the Doolittle raid. But again, it's a case of unintended consequences, things that nobody thought through. It's one of those fortuitous accidents.
My understanding, though, was that in part also as a consequence, a lot of their offensive plans they put on hold in order to go back and shore up their defenses, because we hit their capital. It's here it is, and they're thinking they're invulnerable, and very much sort of the same way we had been.
So it's more so than that. It's, Japan is, as it is for the Russians, it's Holy Mother Russia. Well, for Japan, the home islands, they are literally sacred.
Yeah,
it's part of the religion that, foreigners shouldn't be here. This is our land, and we violate it by dropping bombs. So there's this, visceral reaction to what happened when, practically speaking, from a military standpoint, it was insignificant. It was basically wasting 12 or so medium bombers for no real effect, except it was a profound effect, and it's all the morale and psychological impact.
Well, and so both because of the Battle of Midway and because of the slowdown in their offensive momentum as a result of trying to recuperate or trying to recover from Doolittle raid, that's one of the reasons we were able to recover. And without the Doolittle raid, that we would have lost the war against Japan, the war in the Pacific. Does that sound like a reasonable claim, assuming everything else unfolded the way? Butterfly effect.
I don't think we ever had a chance of losing the war in the Pacific.
Really?
No. The Japanese basically lost the war the moment the first bomb fell on Pearl Harbor. They lacked the population, resource, and industrial base to prosecute a war of the nature that they got themselves involved in. Their whole war philosophy, the whole idea behind attacking Pearl Harbor was that in one blow they could inflict such severe losses on us that we, as weak Westerners, would immediately sue for peace. We'd give them what they wanted. And Yamamoto, who was the commander of the combined fleet, basically told the high command beforehand, you know, I will be able to do anything, run complete freedom to do any operations you want for 6 months. And after 6 months, everything's going to come to a screeching halt. We don't have the ability to continue prosecuting a major war beyond 6 months. And if you look at Mr. Calendar, count from December 7th until the day the Battle of Midway occurred, it's almost exactly 6 months.
So the other book, so the first book I'm going to have to at least start taking notes on it, even if I never write it. I want to write the first one I want to write is all of those 1 in a billions, and there's more to than you can shake a stick at, that changed the outcome. So the Giuseppe Zangaya, the Dunkirk, all of those things, certainly Pearl Harbor. Then the next one is how racism got us into wars we should never have gotten into. But, you know, it's like, oh, they're lazy Westerners, they're slant-eyed Japanese, they're whatever the thing is that causes you to just sit there and say, oh, yeah, they're not really people in the same sense. This will be a piece of cake. Oh. Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for that story. That is one of my favorites. I love the Doolittle raid. That's one I think Americans can be, because that was ingenuity too. That was not easy. It's just like, and as I recall, when Roosevelt first asked for that, they're like, yeah, no, you can't do that. He's like, no, we're going to bomb. I want to find a way to bomb Tokyo. And I was like, no, that really can't be done. He goes, well, find a way. And they're like, well,
make a way.
If you strip down all the planes,
yes, sir, Mr. President, whatever you say.
And it may have been a very poor idea, but it was just like, and then also again the Americans realizing that okay, they're 400 miles out. But it's a chance to bomb Tokyo, and it's a chance to do psychological damage in a way that, yeah. All right. Well, anyways, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have on Operator Starsky. Hopefully. He has been harder to reach recently. I think we all know why. My hope is we'll be able to reach him. We'll be going live even if we don't have him. I think there's always stuff you and I can discuss, and I think there's a lot of benefit to those shows. There's also a lot of benefit when he's around, so we're going to hope for him there because he has a perspective that, obviously is very important, and we want to discuss. But tomorrow, 1 p.m., I'm reasonably confident we will be able to see him tomorrow, so... Again, it's just hilarious when he hits me up with a DM. I'm so sorry, I can't make it. It's like, well, where are you? I'm in a bunker. I can hear the rockets. It's just like,
if I had a dime for every time somebody told me they were in a bunker.
Yeah. Hey, Starsky, how long do you think I've been doing this? You think I haven't heard that one before?
I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, dear Lord. So, thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And I notice, a lot of people, you guys have stuck around in the live chat. You've given the thumbs up, which really helps. I hate asking for that stuff. I much prefer just doing the interviews and all that other stuff, but it has a notable effect on the channel. YouTube notices when people do that, and then they help boost us in the algorithm, and it just helps out. So it's a great way. You can also become a patron of the show. You can super chat. Not on overtime yet, but, And, we're going to continue trying to have good conversations and bring these to you. So thank you all, those of you who supported us. Come in on our Discord. Commander McMillan has been great about answering people's questions. I don't ask him many questions on the Discord, mainly because other people ask him the question first. It's just like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And then I can be there like, yeah, I knew that the whole time, Lance. Yeah, and I didn't ask because I knew exactly that the reason is because, well, let me get my glasses. I'll tell you what the reason is. Anyways, come join us, hang out. And you know what? We like, obviously, really good conversations, but we like fun people. So I hope you guys will come join us for that. Thank you to all the mods. You guys have been doing a great job. Whoever managed to, I suspect it was Titan was able to deal with Tony, who was in there. Tony gets a bad rap, I suppose, but on the other hand, it's like, yeah, he's good. He's good. That's taken care of. Thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lance. It was good to see you as always, and hope to see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Absolutely. Thank you then.
And then actually, here's what I'm going to do real quick. So there is a problem with the graphics driver running the show, and what it's been doing is not displaying the graphics. And what I want to do is right before we go to our outro, which I think is marvelous. It's delightful. You'll love it if you haven't seen it before. I want to make sure that it's going to display. So let me. Well, you know what? It'll take me more time to do it then. So with any luck, you'll see it. You'll certainly hear it. Thank you all for joining us. And, hey, I'm sure we'll get it sorted at some point. This is why we need a producer. Have a good night, all.